Hi, I'm Black Waltz III, or Waltz for short, and welcome to my pitch for a new job in Final Fantasy XIV. I'm going to start out by presenting the pitch in a format similar to the new job reveals during FanFest presentations. Once I've laid out what the job is about, I'll transition into a deep dive of its skills and rotation. This will take a format similar to that of the leveling guides folks such as WeskAlber and Caetsu Chaiji make for the canon jobs. Let's begin. Oftentimes, people plumb the depths of Final Fantasy history to source a job they want to see. For example, Corsair and Green Mage were commonly speculated as candidates for Dawntrail. Likewise, Chemist and Necromancer were popular suggestions for Endwalker. In recent years, Yoshi P has expressed a desire to include more FF14 original jobs, not based on previous ones in the series, as was the case with Viper and Reaper. I agree with this sentiment, and it is through this desire that I have come to develop my idea for a new original job as well. But what led me to my idea? Well, when I started playing FF14, my starting class was Conjurer. I liked the class fantasy of a mage attuned to elemental spirits who wields the natural elements of wind, water, and earth, in contrast to Thaumaturge, who focused on the arcane elements of fire, lightning, and ice. But as I kept playing, I became a white mage, and then hit Shadowbringers, and suddenly all my elements were replaced with holy magic. So, firstly, I wanted to recapture that original class fantasy of a natural elemental mage. During the Endwalker pre-release season, it was a common joke that the new Reaper job actually promoted from the Gatherer class Botanist, since both use scythes. My friends and I found this quite amusing, and joked amongst ourselves about other random non-combat professions promoting into combat jobs as well. I personally suggested the local town Skywatcher getting fed up with just predicting the weather and taking matters into their own hands. Then, post-release, I replayed the game Triangle Strategy, from which the character Ezana, pictured here, originates. She herself is a shamaness who changes the weather during battle, such as by summoning rain or wind or thunderstorms. These will last for several turns, or require a turn delay before taking effect. Additionally, she has skills that modify the target's luck. With all these pieces in place, it was simply a matter of time for them to coalesce into a solid idea. All I had to do then was think of a cool name, that being Harbinger, the seer of ominous portent, or HRB for short. Here is its job icon. What does it depict exactly? I'll explain shortly. But what is a Harbinger in terms of game design? Of course, they are a magical ranged DPS. Their equipped weapon would be a weather vane, hence the job icon. I imagine they would hold it in a similar fashion to an Astrologian's weapons, or Lune's weapon in Clair Obscure Expedition 33, if you've played that. They naturally don't actually have a starting class or a level, so I've put Skywatcher and level 1 here as a bit of a joke, but it is an absolute certainty that if this was a real job, it would have to start in Gridania. Similar to Ezana, I've included Arcanist Oswald from Octopath Traveler 2 to illustrate the aesthetic I'm after. Following the previous two artworks, here's a general idea of what the job gear would look like in-game. This is the Ravel Keeper's casting set from the Shadowbringers level 75 dungeon Kitana Ravel. Other sets of a similar vibe include the Paglothan casting set or the Ghost Bark casting set. And as for what Harbinger does, they cast spells using wind, water, and earth elements. They read the atmospheric ether currents to predict incoming weather events. Then, they manipulate the weather to induce natural disasters. By chaining those disasters together, they can wreak ultimate havoc on the battlefield. For those of you keen on a classic Geomancer type job, this might be up your alley. with some elements of Final Fantasy V Advance's Oracle thrown in for good measure. And here's a bit of background lore for Harbinger. I imagine it as a job that originates in Mericidia. I promise it's not because of any biases I may or may not possess. Harbinger's abilities would be practiced by one of the indigenous allied societies there. It was originally intended as a countermeasure to prevent or minimize the damage of actual natural disasters. However, it was eventually made into an art of war in order to combat the Allagan invasion. Of course it was them, it's always the Allagans. Now, with the general concept of Harbinger covered, let's dig into the specifics. As mentioned earlier, I'm going to structure this part of the video like a 1 to 100 job leveling guide. So it will be broken up into segments comprising the level range for each expansion, namely, level 50 for A Realm Reborn, level 60 for Heavensward, level 70 for Stormblood, level 80 for Shadowbringers, level 90 for Endwalker, and level 100 for Dawntrail. Each of these segments will introduce the actions and traits learned within that range as if Harbinger had been there since 2.0. Then I'll suggest a general combat opener for each level cap, which puts together what I just showed. This will not include any role actions or role traits, as they are assumed knowledge for any job within a given role. Also note that I will not be including any potencies, ranges, or MP costs, and generally will not mention specific cooldown timers. This is purely because I am not nearly knowledgeable enough about the game at that deep of a technical level to calculate balanced numbers for these. If you are, leave some notes in the comments. I'd be really curious to see what you come up with. Now, onto the first segment, A Realm Reborn. Let's start with the basics. Level 1, 12, and 25. Pressurization, condensation, and compaction. These are your basic single target filler GCD spells. Each step in the sequence becomes more powerful if performed after the preceding step. You always want to perform them in order. Also at level 25, Phase Change and Sublimation. This trait gives you a percentage chance to be able to cast Sublimation as an OGCD after finishing your combo. Note that Sublimation itself is an AoE with fall-off damage for targets after the first, so try to target the middle of a pack to maximize the targets and hit the highest HP enemy with the main attack where possible. Level 5, Erosion. This is a basic damage over time spell. You want to try to always maintain uptime of this to keep the damage ticking as much as possible. It's also instant cast, so you can use it on the run during dungeon pulls or when avoiding boss mechanics. Speaking of which, level 35, Evacuate. This is a dash forward, similar to Pictomancer's Smudge or Dancer's En Avant. It's a useful movement tool to get out of a boss's telegraph, or to catch up with the tank if you fall behind. Level 20, 35, and 45. Quicksand, Whirlpool, and Vortex. These are your basic AoE filler GCD spells. Likewise with the single target variations, you'll always want to perform these in order. For both the single target and AoE filler combos, the combo won't break unless you use them out of order or switch between single target and AoE. So you can feel free to slip in other actions in between steps, such as your dot. Also at level 45, Enhanced Phase Change. This allows you to proc Sublimation after finishing your AoE combo as well. This proc does not stack, so make sure to use it before completing another combo. Level 30, Forecast and Tornado. These are the first of your key burst damage buttons used every minute. Forecast will start a 15-second timer in the form of the Tornado Forecast buff, which, after it expires, transforms into Tornado Imminent, allowing you to cast Tornado for big AoE damage. You can only use Forecast in combat, so weave it as early as possible to get the timer rolling. Level 40, Enhanced Forecast and Tsunami. This gives Forecast 2 charges, which can give you a timer for either Tornado or Tsunami. If you already have one of these running, it will give you the other one. Note that Tsunami itself is functionally identical to Tornado in terms of damage. The main difference is that it is a cone AoE in front of you, so be sure to position appropriately. Level 50, Enhanced Forecast 2 and Quake. Forecast now has 3 charges and can give you a timer for Quake as well. Quake, for its part, is a line AoE between you and the target this time, so likewise position yourself accordingly. Let's take a second to look at your job-specific UI. This is the beginning of your job gauge UI element, which initially unlocks at level 30 alongside Forecast and Tornado. Of course, at level 40 and 50, it gets expanded to include icons for Tsunami and Quake as well. To start with, the icons will be grayed out. When forecasting a disaster, its icon will fill up with color as the timer ticks down. Once the timer expires and allows you to cast, the icon will flash, and then, after casting, will return to grey once more. And that's all the actions up to level 50. There's not much of an opener at this point, but let's set down some general principles. I'm going to assume for convenience's sake that forecasts always come out in the order of Tornado, Tsunami, and then Quake. Please note, however, that the order is random, so make sure to pay attention to which timers proc in which order. To start with, weave your forecasts in between your filler spells as early as possible to get all the timers running. Note that you can't double weave 2 forecasts because of its own recast time, hence putting them after separate GCDs. Then repeat your filler, spending any sublimation procs if you get them, until the timers elapse, at which point you can unleash your 3 disaster spells, then reapply your dot when it's nearly expired. Otherwise, go back to your filler spells and procs until forecast comes off cooldown again for your 1-minute burst. Now let's run through that in real time, as if you were casting it in-game. Pre-pull, cast Pressurization, Forecast, Erosion, Potion, Forecast, Condensation, Forecast, Compaction, Sublimation, Pressurization, Condensation, Compaction, Sublimation, Tornado, Tsunami, Quake. Now for the Heavensward level range. Starting with level 52, Ominous Portent. This adds the Omen gauge onto your job-specific UI. Here's what the Omen gauge looks like. By default, it sits underneath the disaster indicators, like so. It fills up by casting your basic single target or AoE filler combo spells. Ideally, you want to avoid overcapping this resource, but how do you spend it? Level 52, Meteorology. This is an instant cast circle AoE with reduced damage to targets after the first. If you have a Tornado forecast timer running, it also instantly consumes it to proc Tornado imminent regardless of how much time was remaining. Similarly, level 54 and level 56, Hydrology and Seismology. These are the same spells but for Tsunami and Quake timers respectively. The main advantage for using these is to be able to fire off your disaster spells sooner. However, you should use them even without a timer running to avoid overcapping your gauge and to get the bonus AoE damage as well. Level 58, Clear Skies. This is a single target cleanse with a cooldown, similar to Bard's The Warden's Paean. You can use this during solo play to remove a debuff from yourself, or during group content to help out your healers in removing debuffs from your party. Also at level 58, Weather Mastery. This trait provides just a simple potency increase for your basic filler spells and your dot. Finally, level 60, Extreme Weather Warning. This is your personal damage buff. You will always want to use this during your openers and at every subsequent 2-minute burst. Here is your level 60 opener. There aren't a lot of changes here, but notably you now have a nice damage buff to burst under. In the opener, you won't have enough omen gauge generation yet to effectively use your omen spells, so just slot it in after your disasters for damage alone for now. In your subsequent bursts, you should have enough gauge to properly spend on your timers. You'll then be able to bring disasters earlier in your burst. However, at this level range, that still won't change much in terms of damage. Once again, let's run through that in real time, as if you were casting it in-game. Pre-pull, cast, pressurization, forecast, erosion, potion, forecast, condensation, forecast, compaction, extreme weather, pressurization, sublimation, condensation, compaction, sublimation, tornado, tsunami, quake, meteorology. Let's look at your Stormblood skills next. Level 62, Destructive Scale. Your job UI will now indicate the intensity level of each of your 3 disasters. The intensity can increase by using actions of the matching element, wind damage for tornado, and so on. However, this does not count the disaster itself. With the ability to intensify your main 3 disasters, the job UI updates to reflect this. Each pip indicates a level of intensity above the default, which would show as 0 pips. Naturally, each disaster's intensity is independent of the others, so filling and consuming one will not affect the other 2. But how do you consume these? Level 62, Tornado Mastery and Tornado 2. Tornado upgrades alongside this trait to have variable potency based on its displayed intensity. At the base level, it does the same damage as it did before, but this climbs higher with each subsequent intensity level. Then, at level 64, Tsunami Mastery and Tsunami 2, and level 66, Quake Mastery and Quake 2. Of course, these are the same upgrades for your other 2 disaster spells. Level 68, Finding Fault and Aftershock. This trait will proc a new AoE ability, Aftershock, to weave after casting all 3 disaster spells. Since Aftershock deals AoE damage with fall-off, you could say it's similar to sublimate procs for your filler spells. Note that the disasters don't have to be cast in any particular order, but do all have to be cast during the same battle. Then, level 70, Tempting Fate. This ability instantly fills the Omen gauge by enough to effectively get 1 free cast of any of your 3 Omen spells. This will come in handy during your opener. However, during subsequent bursts, where you already have some gauge filled, be careful not to overcap when using it. Let's take a look at the level 70 opener. With the introduction of Tempting Fate, you can now spend gauge straight away during your opener. Optimally, you should use the Omen spell for whichever forecast came last to get the most benefit. In this example, it was Quake, so you should immediately follow up with Seismology. However, do remember that the forecast procs are randomized, so it may not necessarily be Quake every time. Double weave your Potion and Extreme Weather Warning buff right after, then, since it allows you to cast your first disaster early, do so right at the start of your burst. Then you can continue your filler combo while the timers for your first 2 disasters naturally elapse. Cast those, weave Aftershock, and return to filler as your burst ends, remembering to spend any sublimation procs you get and refresh your dot. Now it's time to run through the real-time casting sequence again. Pre-pull, cast, pressurization, forecast, erosion, Tempting Fate, forecast, condensation, forecast, seismology, potion, extreme weather warning, Quake 2, compaction, sublimation, pressurization, tornado 2, Tsunami 2, Aftershock, Condensation, Compaction, Sublimation. Here are the abilities for the Shadowbringers level range. Starting with level 72, Weather Mastery 2. This is just another potency buff for your basic filler spells and dot, same as before. However, also at level 72, Shelter in Place. You now have a party-wide shield you can apply on cooldown. This should be handy for reducing party damage during raid wides, or helping your tank out during a big dungeon pull. Level 74, Never Strikes Twice. This new trait adds 2 stacks of a given doublet buff after casting each of your disaster spells while under the effect of extreme weather warning. While you have the appropriate doublet buffs active, your filler combo spells will transform into new doublet disasters, such as level 74, Doublet Disaster Water and Hurricane. First is a powerful circle AoE which requires Tornado 2 and Tsunami 2 to be cast. Naturally, it consumes 1 stack of the Doublet Wind and Doublet Water buffs. Level 76, Doublet Disaster Earth and Landslide. This is a powerful Cone AoE which requires Tsunami 2 and Quake 2 to be cast. And level 78, Doublet Disaster Wind and Pyroclasm, which is a powerful line AoE requiring Quake 2 and Tornado 2 to be cast. Note that, like Aftershock, the order in which the disasters are cast doesn't matter, as long as they're all cast within the same battle. Since each base disaster grants 2 stacks of a single doublet buff, and each doublet disaster consumes 1 stack of 2 different doublet buffs, this means that casting all 3 disasters also allows you to cast all 3 doublet disasters, so be careful not to accidentally use 2 of the same doublet disaster. Let's quickly check back in on your job-specific UI. With the addition of doublet disasters, these are now displayed as pips underneath your omen gauge. They will only light up while the conditions for casting are met and go dark again after they've been cast. For example, the first blue pip for Hurricane only lights up if you have a Doublet Wind and Doublet Water buff active at the same time. If multiple doublet disasters can be cast, then all of their respective pips will light up. To close out this level range, we have level 80, Enhanced Finding Fault. Now you can weave Aftershock after using all 3 doublet disasters as well. And level 80, Unforeseen Circumstances. This ability grants you a buff which allows you to cast a disaster without having forecast it first. If you happen to already have a forecast timer active for a given disaster, this buff will be consumed before the forecast buff. This means you could cast the same disaster spell twice in a row, if you wanted to. Let's review the opener. This will be the biggest change so far with all the new upgrades and additions in this level range. After fast tracking your 3rd forecast disaster with your Omen spell, use Unforeseen Circumstances to immediately use your 2nd one for free. As your first disaster naturally elapses, weave Aftershock, then head right into doublet disasters. Likewise weave Aftershock after those, then spend the natural 2nd disaster you got for free earlier. After your burst ends, refresh your dot and return to filler. Now let's practice the real-time opener again. Pre-pull, cast Pressurization, Forecast, Erosion, Tempting Fate, Forecast, Condensation, Forecast, Seismology, Potion, Extreme Weather Warning, Quake 2, Unforeseen Circumstance, Tsunami 2, Compaction, Sublimation, Tornado 2, Aftershock, Hurricane, Landslide, Pyroclasm, Aftershock, Tsunami 2. Here are the abilities and traits in the Endwalker level range. Level 82, Omen Mastery. Pretty much what it says on the tin, more potency for your Omen spells. Level 84, Worst Case Scenario. This ability instantly maxes out your disaster's intensity gauges, so it's great to weave during your opener. Level 86, Enhanced Evacuate, and level 88, Enhanced Tempting Fate. These are both upgrades to some of your abilities to give 2 charges of them. More Evacuates will surely come in handy in a pinch, but more Tempting Fates means more Omens, which means faster disaster casts. Level 90, Enhanced Extreme Weather Warning and Supercell. Capping off your Endwalker skills is this new upgrade to your personal buff. After using it, it transforms into a new ability, Supercell. This is a powerful ground-targeted damage over time field, which damages all enemies that walk into it and continues to damage them for each tick that they remain inside it, similar to Ninja's Doton or Dark Knight's Salted Earth. Let's check in on the opener. Now that you have 2 stacks of Tempting Fate, you can immediately cast 2 Omen spells pre-burst, and notably, between those and Unforeseen Circumstances, that means there's no need to use all 3 of your forecasts straight away. The extra weave window from the second Omen spell also allows you to juice up the resulting disasters with worst case scenario. After your first disaster, you can weave in Supercell to start that ticking while under buffs. Then, after the second, you can weave Unforeseen Circumstances to get your third disaster for free, then immediately forecast to get it ticking again. Follow up with your doublet disasters and aftershocks, then close out your filler under buffs. Your dot and third disaster's natural timer should be up right as buffs end. Once more, here's the opener sequence in real time. Pre-pull, cast Pressurization. Forecast, Erosion, Tempting Fate, Forecast, Meteorology, Tempting Fate, Worst Case Scenario, Hydrology, Potion, Extreme Weather Warning, Tornado 2, Supercell, Tsunami 2, Unforeseen Circumstance, Quake 2, Forecast, Hurricane, Aftershock, Landslide, Pyroclasm, Aftershock, Condensation, Compaction, Sublimation, Erosion, Quake 2. Almost done now with the Dawntrail level range. Level 92, Weather Mastery 3. Yet another small potency buff for your filler spells. And likewise, level 96, Disaster Mastery. A small potency buff for your disaster spells too, including the variable potencies from the disaster intensity gauge, the doublet disasters, and Aftershock. Level 98, Enhanced Unforeseen Circumstances. A second charge to play with, which means even more instant disasters. And to cap it all off at level cap, level 100, Never Strikes Thrice, Doomsday, and Enhanced Finding Fault 2. After using all 3 doublet disasters and clearing the stacks of doublet buffs, you now get a new buff called Triplet Darkness. This allows you to cast Doomsday, the final step in your escalating chain of disasters. It is of course a very large AoE spell that does a lot of damage and less to all other enemies in a circle nearby it. It's also followed by a third and final opportunity to use Aftershock. A little reminder that each time you trigger Aftershock Ready applies the same buff, so it can be overwritten and lose you a cast if you don't spend it promptly. The final update to the job gauge is the indicator for Doomsday casts. Similar to the doublet disasters, it sits underneath the Omen gauge and lights up purple. A small note here. In practice, you wouldn't really have all of these UI elements lit up like this at once. This is because you must have cast the doublet disasters in order to unlock Doomsday, which means that all 4 of their pips cannot be displayed at once. Likewise, since you must have cast all of the single disasters to unlock the doublets, the single disaster indicators and their intensity levels would not be filled in at the same time as those. This is just an illustration to show how each of these elements look together. With the final piece of your puzzle in place, this time the opener doesn't change all that much from the previous time. The main difference is the addition of Doomsday and the third Aftershock at the end of the chain. The extra use of Unforeseen Circumstances comes in late as well to smuggle a 4th single disaster under buffs. Combined with the delayed third forecast from earlier, this means you can get 5 single disasters under your pot window. Now, for the final time, here is the fullest opener as performed in real time. Pre-pull, cast, pressurization, forecast, erosion, tempting fate, forecast, meteorology, tempting fate, worst case scenario, hydrology, potion, extreme weather warning, tornado 2, supercell, tsunami 2, unforeseen circumstance, quake 2, forecast, hurricane, aftershock, landslide, unforeseen circumstance, pyroclasm, aftershock, doomsday, aftershock, tornado 2, erosion, quake 2. And that's all of Harbinger's skills and traits. But there is one other thing. Harbinger's LB3. What could possibly be more apocalyptic than Doomsday, I hear you ask? Well, how about Advanced Calculus? Oh, and also a supernova. Thankfully, the casting animation doesn't take 2 entire minutes. Purely for reference, here is a full list of Harbinger's actions and traits, organized by level. This is all of what I already covered in detail during the leveling guide, summarized on a single page. Bolded text indicates damaging actions, while normal text is for non-damaging actions, and italicized text is for traits. Role actions and role traits are included here for completeness, but grayed out, as they are not unique to Harbinger. Feel free to pause here if you want to review it, otherwise, that's all I have to say about Harbinger. Before I go, I'd like to offer some special thanks. The Izana and Oswald artworks come courtesy of Naoki Ikushima, a Team Asano character designer. The Ravel Keeper's set image comes courtesy of Chiyo Asakura, who posted their screenshot on the Lodestone page for the casting top. The 1 to 100 leveling guide format comes courtesy of WeskAlber and Caetsu Chaiji, both on YouTube. And the job icon and gauge UI designs come courtesy of my friend Caps. Links to all of the above will be included in the description. And that's the end of the video. What did you think? Would you play this job? Please leave a comment if you have any thoughts, opinions, or suggestions. Thanks for watching!